So welcome and good morning and happy Super Bowl Sunday to all of you. I know that you wish for me to be brief today, so I'll try to be. I just love it though. I love being here with you. So this morning we are going to continue with our study of human consciousness. You remember that we started this last week, and really what we're doing is we're asking the question, how is it? We're really asking two questions. How is it that we grow on an individual basis in spirituality? And also, how do we take that rather cosmic mission statement that Carol shared with us a little while ago, that idea of creating a world that truly is better for every inhabitant on the planet? How do we make that life-sized? Because that's a huge cosmic statement and a beautiful idea and concept. But if we think about that for a little while, I don't know about you guys, I have trouble wrapping my mind around, how do we create a world that is working for everyone? It seems like almost a mission that is way too large for any one of us. It certainly seems like a mission that, Andrew Harvey has done a great job in the book, The Hope, that Tom just shared with us, in creating ways for us to distill that and bring it down to bite-sized. His treat and move your feet is certainly one way that we do that. Yes, ma'am, it certainly is. But so what we're going to do today is continue to talk about human consciousness, and again, how do we take that idea, that concept that's so lofty and exquisite, and make it our own, our personal commitment or truth or reality or practice, okay? Last week we talked a lot about this model that's on the next slide here. If Susan would pull that up. There we go. This is a model that I refer to as to me, by me, through me, as me. It's one word, okay? So, and we talked a lot specifically about to me consciousness. We also understand from last week and from what we talked about that while this is kind of a linear trajectory, it's not possible to talk about human consciousness from a linear perspective. Because the truth of the matter is, if it's 5:30 in the morning and I'm being told I need to get up, get my act together, go to work and look like a spiffy, polished, professional human being, okay, I might have a very to-me mentality about that, since I don't care too much for morning and might not really want to be getting up that early and going off to work. I might have some really strong ideas about what I could do. It might have to do with sleep, okay, But so that might be my mental state of awareness at 5:30 in the morning. But I might look at other areas of my life and move very easily to a much more comfortable place in consciousness. So you'll remember that as we talked about to me consciousness, we understand that, or recall that anytime we're really kind of languishing in a place of self-pity or resentment or something really difficult emotionally, where we feel very stuck, perhaps we're angry at a situation, we may to some degree be experiencing some to-me mindset. The reality of it is that whenever anyone is conditioned to thinking like this, and I don't know about you guys, but I actually think that this was what I was nursed on as an infant, okay? This is the mentality, the mindset that I received in my home of origin as a very young child. It's very difficult and challenging and takes a lot of courage and energy to shift away from that. For one thing, we understand, and we talked about this last week, that anytime we have a thought, and it's a repetitive thought, we are creating superhighways in the brain, okay, where we literally are lighting up millions of not neurotransmitters, but neurons, okay, and producing neurotransmitters that are in turn very addictive to our brains. So the brain wants to think those thoughts because it wants to feel those feelings, because it wants to get that brain juice high. It's really not much of a high, okay? I've been a lot higher in other states of consciousness, but we get attached to that. And so we cycle around through that, and we literally create, a strong mental mindset of that. And it does get very difficult to shift away from it. It's almost like that's my flavor, and I'm not going to choose any other flavor. That's the only. Carol asked me what my kind of birthday cake I wanted, and I said there's only one flavor. That's it. Okay. So you can get that with somebody who's got a to-me mindset, who's embroiled in that. They've only got that one flavor, and it ain't chocolate. Okay. It takes a huge shift. It takes a lot of courage and energy to move ourselves, coach ourselves, nurture ourselves, love ourselves, and parent ourselves enough to move away from that. I had a friend many years ago who was a practicing heroin addict who came into recovery and made huge strides. This is somebody who would have been dead momentarily, basically, and the end would have been very ugly. I'm sure he would not have gone alone. He had a lot of strength and charisma even then, and I'm sure he would have carried other individuals with him. But he said that he really began to grow spiritually when it was like the lights came on one day, and he realized that in all the bad experiences he'd ever had, there were two constants. One was dope, and it had gone the other way. The second was himself. And he began to realize the way I'm thinking, the way I'm behaving, the practices that I'm subscribing to, the way I am living, have a huge amount to do with how I'm living and the experiences I'm having. So it really is a pretty incredible impact that has on us. Change at this level can be very hairy. Again, when we recognize that it's our thought-laden feelings that create substances in the brain that our bodies attach to and want more of. Okay, it's really, really powerful. As we begin to move to mature psycho-spiritually, we begin to take more responsibility for ourselves and for the quality of our lives. And what happens then is we begin to shift into by-me consciousness. We've begun to understand here that at some very elemental level, we're contributing to the formation of the experiences that we're having. Things don't just happen for no reason at all. Now, often people say to me, and I know it was my experience too, when that shadow of by-me consciousness begins to lift a little, that I looked at all of this. What happened for me was somebody gave me a copy of Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. And my first response, pardon me, was that's bullshit. Okay? My life is a piece of junk. It's going to stay a piece of junk. I've always been unsuccessful. At that time, I wasn't, I had a history of doing a lot of drugs. Okay? I believed that was only a fad, and that my being in recovery was only a fad. I believed that I would go back to using, and that was a short amount of time. And my fear was not that I would die. My fear was that I would live for a long damn time and take my one child, my mother, and anybody else I could drag along with me. That's not a pretty, prediction, guys. Okay? Somebody gave me Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. I read it in one day. When the guy came back the next day, I threw the book across the room at him. I promise I don't throw things at people or animals anymore, okay? That's been many, many, many years ago. Many decades, thank you, God, okay? But, the shadow of that to-me consciousness began to be lifted. And the first thing out of my mouth was, I didn't create this mess. I didn't ask to be an addict or to have this happen or to have a kid at 17 and be alone. I didn't ask for any of this, okay? And that was true. It's 100% true. People come to me and say, how could you say I created this illness? How do you think in a million years that I would ever have this situation where, I've got this and this and this and this and this going on, or I lost my job, or my lover left me, or she came back and I didn't want her to, or, whatever it is, okay? Whatever the heck it is that's going on, how could you say I had anything to do with that? And the truth of the matter is, on a conscious level, we don't. Okay? We don't. But Ernest Holmes got it. When he looked at human consciousness, he said, there's a place we create from where we are consciously conscious. We know what's going on, okay? We're aware that maybe we'd like to tell somebody to take a fly and leave, okay? We're aware that maybe a certain situation doesn't work for us anymore. It really never has, but we're just beginning to get that, I don't know about you guys. I've been able to live in situations that seemed intolerable for a long time and wake up one day and go, what the heck am I doing here? I don't know about you, but I've done that, okay? So we begin to get it. We begin to shift, okay? And what we realize is that there's not just that consciousness. There's an unconscious consciousness too. Can we see the next slide, Susan? Thank you. You've heard me talk very often of the iceberg, okay? It's a perfect analogy for what's going on here. We have the consciousness, and that's what's above the waterline. That's the stuff we're aware of. That's yes, I know I have a certain attitude about a certain individual and a certain way of thinking about that person, and I need to look at that, okay? That's stuff we're aware of. But there's also this mass under the water, this unconscious consciousness, and sometimes, actually, all the time, we're creating just as much from that place as we are that conscious consciousness. So it's very easy when things come back and we go, I didn't order this. It's like going to a restaurant and you order, something, and it comes, and this happened to us Friday night. Mike and I went to the coffee shop. Very quickly, the little gal came back, and I looked at what I had ordered, and I thought, I know I didn't order mustard on that, okay? Because I eat like mustard with one food in the world, and that's it, okay? It wasn't on that plate. And I looked at what he got, and it was Friday night. I can't remember anything for more than about 30 seconds, so I really wasn't sure what was going on. By then I've given up caring, okay? So the week has had its way with me, and I'm just, I'm subscribing to I don't know, okay? And a few minutes later, the guy across the aisle said, you guys got our food. Well, by then I had my grubby little hand all over his double cheeseburger, which is not what I ordered, thank you very much. Okay, it looked like what I had ordered, but it wasn't, okay? And so I said to him, guess you're going to have to get her back over here because, Mike knew. He was like, I didn't order chicken and dumplings, I ordered pork chops, okay? I'm like, whatever. I think the chick was, maybe she needed to go talk to that guy in recovery, I don't know. Something interesting was happening that night in that restaurant. But it's like we order something, and it comes, we order a life experience, and it comes, and we go, hey, I didn't order that. That's not what I want. That's not me. That's not for me. That's not going to work, okay? And where did it come from? It came from that place that's under the water. It came from that place in consciousness that we really are not aware of. This is the place that therapists love because they love to say, that is your early childhood experience right there. Before you could walk and talk, all those impressions that you soaked up, okay? All those repetitive experiences that you seem to be happening in the world. I don't know about you ladies, but what about your relationships with men? Ever noticed a pattern there? Oh, yeah, okay. It was like, just kick me in the head. Get me a donkey and kick me in the head. Maybe it'll leave, okay? And before I got conscious of it, it was a very interesting, I could, make your head spin with some things I could tell you. But at any rate, we've got this thing going on, and it's from all of that goes out into the world, and it begins to create, okay? So when we begin to look at by me consciousness, we're like, I didn't order that, but maybe we did. Maybe we did, and we just weren't conscious of it, okay? So we're beginning to make that stuff conscious of it, conscious. By me consciousness is really interesting because some things can come about in some pretty interesting ways. I just had an experience of watching a friend of mine. This is someone that I work with. And the first of the year, she made one of those New Year's resolutions. I don't do New Year's resolutions. I was someplace recently and somebody said I do New Year's evolutions. And I like that idea much better. Resolution makes it sound like there's a problem to be, dealt with. Whereas evolution makes it sound a lot more like a choice. But this gal had made a New Year's resolution, and her resolution was to be a lot more conscious and clear in mastering like some exercise activities and some diet changes. And what I have seen just in this short period of time we've been in 2016 is that she has done a masterful job. This is not somebody who subscribes to metaphysical teachings. But what I have seen is that by me consciousness has literally come into play in her life through her taking an active, responsible, I should say more active, responsible role in how she's taking care of her physical, expression, her physical body. Along with that, what I have seen is that change in consciousness has come hand in hand with a much stronger sense of self. She's a tough gal. She's in her 30s. She's tough. She's beautiful. She comes in every day and she pulls up her little shirt sleeve and she's showing me that muscle. Okay, and I'm like, honey, sister, I am in amazement of you. She's got confidence. She is, she's feeling it. She's getting the endorphins going in a different way in her brain and in her body, and she just feels great. It almost makes me sick some mornings because it's way too early for that business. Not really, I love it though, okay? By me consciousness can come about through some other ways too. Sometimes they are not fun, okay? A growth in consciousness might be predicated by some kind of seeming tragedy. We go through a painful event, perhaps we lose a loved one, or we have some part of our life, something that we just can't imagine living without, go by the wayside. And what happens is we're forced, literally, to reach down inside and find that deeper self, find that deeper divinity that lives inside of all of us, okay? Doesn't it stink that it takes pain to create that kind of gain? But we come out on the other end of it much stronger, much more able people. There are so many in history and in our lives, even today, that we can look at that have had that experience. One of my favorites is a guy I met several years ago at our Centers for Spiritual Living annual gathering out in Asilomar, California. His name is Azim Kamisa, and you can Google him. He is phenomenal. Azim, just being in his presence almost makes me weep. Not quite, just barely over 21 years ago in January, Azim lost his 20-year-old son, Tariq. Tariq was a student at the University of California. He was out delivering pizzas. That was his part-time job. It was a Friday night or a Saturday night. He was making his last delivery. He was shot and killed by 14-year-old Tony Hicks as part of a gang initiation. And the inside story about that is that Tony Hicks had fallen into this gang when he was 9 years old. He was at an initiation point, and they had told him, you do this, or we will take out your mama, honey. We will take out somebody in your family. So he really didn't feel like he had a choice. Would you? He didn't know what to do. He shot and killed Tariq Kamisa. Tariq's daddy, Azim, is huge. He's just an amazing spiritual presence. Before all this happened, he was a practicing Sufi Muslim. Now, say what anybody will about Muslims, but what I want you to know is what you see on the news is nothing but a horrid example of extremism. It is one of the most devout and deeply spiritual paths that a human being can walk. And Azim Kamisa was well on that path. He knew, he woke up, and he if you go on the TKF, Tariq Kamisa Foundation, tkf.org website, you can read Azim's story. It took him several months. I mean, at one point during that, he was literally in a place of suicide. He just could not pull himself out of his grief over the loss of his child. He woke up one day and he realized you can let this kill you or you can let this make you. And what he has done since then is create just a huge worldwide presence in this foundation where he goes all over the world and he teaches forgiveness. The first thing he did was he embraced Pless Felix. Pless is the grandfather of Tony Hicks, the gunman. The gunman who, by the way, at 14 was the first person to be tried and convicted of murder in the state of California as an adult at that age, okay, at 14 years of age. Tony is still in prison, okay? He did not face the death penalty. He is still in prison. And I'm going to say he has 4 or 5 more years to go. And when he is released, he is coming to work for Azim and Pless in the tkf.org in their foundation. Okay? They go all over the world. They talk and teach peace and forgiveness. They do especially a lot of work in inner city gang things and in huge high schools where gangs just literally are tearing things apart, where the social mores are just, devastated because of what is happening in gang life, okay? It's huge. Read about Azim, okay? He went through that by me experience. Surely he had a strong foundation in deep spiritual awareness before any of this happened. But he has taken a huge tragedy and made it literally shine the light of love all over this planet. How incredible is that? Another person that I really respect that has epitomized by me consciousness is Dr. Joe Dispenza. Several weeks ago, you may have been here when I spoke about Joe in a book. His most recent book that he wrote is called You Are the Placebo. At age 23, right after opening a chiropractic practice, Joe was in a bike race. He was in a triathlon. He was on his bike in the bike part of the triathlon. He was hit by a woman driving an SUV at 55 miles an hour. The result left pieces of his spinal cord column on the highway, literally on the highway. He was told by 3 sets of medical teams, you have to have surgery. We must put what they refer to as a Harrington rod, a steel rod, in your spine. That is the only way you will ever possibly walk again, and the prognosis still isn't really great that you ever will. He said no to the surgery. He got a couple of friends to agree to help him for a couple of months. He spent deep time. He could not move. He was face down, okay, in this contraption they had him in someone's home. He spent deep time developing a strong guided meditation. He had the knowledge from his, training as a chiropractor to rebuild his spine, okay, to put that thing back together. It took him 6 weeks to develop that meditation. At the end of a total of 9 weeks, he was walking. He was doing what they said he probably would never do again. At 10 weeks, he went back to work. He got by me consciousness. He got that when he stood in a place of truth, when he refused to listen, to know that it couldn't happen, when he absolutely refused to accept that, he watched his world come back together. He trained himself through his thinking and his knowing and his subscribing to understanding that there was something living within every one of us that has the capacity to help us do anything we want to do. He understood what we know about by me consciousness in science of mind, and that is this, that spiritual law governs this universe, and that it says yes to anything we entertain. So if I'm walking around with a thought that says I will never be happy again in this lifetime, guess the heck what? The universe says, okay, fine. You ordered it, you got it, baby. Okay? We'll even maybe supersize that one. But if I made the decision, like I did about 10 years ago, to just say, damn it all, I don't care what happens in that external world. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what happens with my body. I don't care what my kids do. I don't care what my significant other does or doesn't do. I'm going to be happy. Get out of my way. Okay? You can't stop me from being happy. There's nothing you can throw at me that will take that away from me on a permanent basis. Guess what? You will be. And guess what? The universe will hear it, and the universe will oblige. And your life will get better and better and better and better. That's by me consciousness. Okay? And we don't have to do it alone. All we ever have to do is claim that belief, is hold to that thought that is, yes, I can have, I can be, I can do whatever it is. It might be nothing to someone else. To you, it might be everything. She's sitting up here smiling and rocking and saying yes, because she knows, okay? She's got it. She's been around this long enough to understand that we claim our truth, and the law only and always has one answer, and that answer is yes, okay? And it isn't just for one of us. Ernest Holmes got it very early on in his spiritual development, that whatever can happen for any one of us can happen for every one of us. We are the key. We have the key. All we have to do is put it in the lock and hold firm in our belief. Binding consciousness. Very powerful stuff. There's some more to come. I just have to find it. So we continue on our journey on this psycho-spiritual growth process. And what happens then as we move into through me consciousness? What has happened here on a consciousness level is that we have begun to get out of the way. Okay? We have begun to allow that part of ourselves, looking at the iceberg, we have said, wait a minute, that unconscious part, there's something bigger than that can override that every day of the week, and I call it God. You don't have to call it God. I don't care what you call it. But we begin to recognize that that divine stuff can take hold of us and move us through anything and everything we might experience. We have only to say yes to it. We begin to call on that divine stuff within, because we understand in this science of mind teaching, we get it, that God isn't just up there. God is everywhere. There's no place that we can look to, no truth that we can find, no obstacle that we can face that we can't find God in, if we simply look at it and see it and claim it. Ernest Holmes got it, and he called God it, by the way. In a lot of places, he called God the thing. I'm like, what was he like, channeling the Addams family or something? I don't know, right? Okay? But he got it, okay? I heard an amazing story about a young man who embodied through me consciousness. Many of you know Kathy Calabrese that lives out in Whittier. Well, a couple of weeks ago we had that big snow, and it snowed a lot out in that area, okay? And during the snow, I was so grateful, because in my world, when we have storms like that, the two things that I really want to see continue to happen is I want the power to stay on, because I don't have any water if I don't have any power. The only heat I have is kerosene, and it stinks. It's not my friend, okay? I mean, it's God and all, and I'd rather not use it. And the internet. I wanted the internet to stay on so I could stay hooked up to friends and family and, just play when I wanted to play and that kind of thing. Well, Kathy posted on Facebook that her grandson, who lives with her on occasion part of the time, had hauled up like 7 loads of firewood they had built a little lean-to or something, I'm not sure what, but they had built a building for firewood right near the house, okay, or near the residence, and he had hauled 7 loads of firewood up right before that storm started. He knew it was coming, they'd watched the weather, and so he was really planning to take care of them, on a very strong level. And he told her after he was done with the 7th load that it really, the last load was just pushing everything he had physically, that he was just barely able to do it. And so what he did was he called on the elements. He called on the world at large. Okay? He basically said to that strength and power, work through me. Be my legs, be my arms, be my ability. Help me get this last load up there, and then I'm going to quit and reward myself with who knows what. Okay? Kathy said to him, what did you call on? And he said, I called on the elements of the earth and the air and the water and the trees around me and the very firewood itself, because I knew that it would help me. If it came here for a reason, I knew that it would support me. That sounds far-fetched, but our ancestors did that. Before we had a God in the sky, we called on the elements of earth, fire, water, and so on. Okay? If we look to modern day teachings, even our Wiccan practitioners still do that. Okay? There is strength and love all around us. We've all heard funny stories of how things happened and they just couldn't happen. One of my favorites is one that came to me through the Center for Spiritual Living Asheville, where for years ago, somebody was in right there on Patton Avenue, and all the cars are flying, and all of a sudden there's a 10-car pileup in front of them, and they just laid down on the brakes, and they knew it was hopeless. They just knew it wasn't going to happen. And somehow, there were no skid marks later. That vehicle was simply delivered from whatever happened. Okay? We forget that we're living in an incredibly potent, powerful universe. We have only to call on that total divinity all around us, in us, and through us to do what it is we seek to do. Perhaps with through me consciousness, we even begin to channel. I find it very interesting that Abraham, through the mouthpiece of Esther Hicks, talks about Napoleon Hill being a channel for incredible consciousness. If you've been around Open Door for long in metaphysics, you will remember Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich. And in that book, he basically tells us toward the end, he talks about, I think it's 13 different individuals who were incredibly successful in business and in creating financial wealth for themselves, okay, and for the world. He literally talks about bringing those presences, or that collective consciousness, that belief, those beliefs and those understandings and that knowledge to bear in our own little mastermind kind of community. How many times have you looked sort of outside yourself at your ancestors, or even your parents, dead and gone perhaps, grandparents, and known that their very wisdom, their very beauty and strength is leaching through you, having its way out in the world. Incredibly powerful. It makes me wonder about Ernest Holmes, too. I read something this week on the minister's listserv that said that when he died, they found a copy of the book Divine Life by Sri Aurobindo on his chest. I don't know if that's true, but he read so much. He read so many authors and so much about world religions that it just, it stands to reason that he had to have tapped in to a collective consciousness, to the beauty of the masses, if you will, the teachings of the divine as a whole in bringing forth science of mind. Through me consciousness requires one thing of us, and that is that we embrace to middling or more degrees the spiritual technique of simply surrendering, of letting go and recognizing, yes, there's that big mass under the water. There's that stuff I seemingly can't control and don't even know anything about. But what I believe and know is that all of that is contained within the very heart and mind of God. That there's no place where God is not. That God lives in that darkness as much as in that light. And so we simply release to that and allow that to be the truth that we live. If we continue in our conscious journey, we move eventually to what we call Esme consciousness. When you think of that, who comes to mind? The one for me that I think of first off is, of course, Jesus the Christ. I think that he came here to be not so much a savior as a way shower. These things and more shall ye do. He wasn't saying maybe. He wasn't saying some of you. He wasn't saying only if you got your, act together in a certain way. He was saying these things and more shall every one of us do. Okay? I believe he came here to walk a walk of Esme consciousness so that we would have a worldly example by which to follow, to recognize that if one can, anyone can. Others that come to mind when I think of Esme consciousness include that one who is known as John of God. Do you know who I'm talking about? Yes. Google John of God. John of God lives in Brazil. He is Brazilian, I believe. He has a spiritual healing clinic there. He sees thousands of people every week. They move through there. I think he sees people for free or donations. I don't know the exact specifics, okay? But what we know is that when somebody simply steps aside and understands that the divine is all powerful, that potential moves through them. Rob Worgan, who now lives in Asheville, says that when he does what he does, he gets out of the way. Because it ain't about him. It never was. He had no idea he could do this until when he was a child, he was out walking in the woods, and animals came up to him. And they said, "You can heal me. I'm really sick. Put a hand on me." Well, he had a very strong, strict religious upbringing from his family. He believed deeply in God. He would put one hand up and one hand on the critter, and the sucker would be healed. Okay? And he learned through that there were some amazing things happening with him. Another one that comes to mind is that one known as Edgar Casey, who that gift that he had caused his life literally to become shambles over and over. You know, he was locked up over and over for practicing medicine without a license. He was literally, if you read There Is a River by Thomas Subaru, what you find out about Casey, especially in his early life, he had a very strict mainstream religious upbringing. And it was an upbringing that taught that the kinds of psychic powers that he had literally were the works of the devil. I can't imagine having that struggle, okay? And yet having that gift, and how much he helped people, how potent and huge that must have been for so many of the people who came to know him, either personally or remotely. These individuals that I have mentioned are so special, indeed, but I don't believe that they're any more gifted or any more special than any one of us. In 1960, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi stated that if 1% of the world population would begin to practice transcendental meditation, the world would get better for every individual on it. In 1974, some researchers put that to the test. They began to conduct studies of quantitative meditative type practices and the crime rate in the same areas geographically where people were meditating. And what they found out is that the crime dropped on an average of 16%. The Dalai Lama has told us that we have the capacity to bring forth peace within the next generation if only every 8-year-old child will be taught to meditate. I can't wait on our world at large system to catch up with that. Can you, and will our children, and will their children? I want to know when I lay down at the end of the day, I want to know when I lay down and leave this physical expression that everything I have done has been for creating a world that brings about more depth, more peace, more truth, more light, more wholeness. Are you with me in this? I think it is so powerful. I think we are so capable. How incredibly amazing that would be to know that. Ernest Holmes got it. He said it very simply when he said that the world has learned all that it can learn through suffering. I don't stand a chance of being in pain for very long. I have a very low, minimal kind of threshold to bullshit, pardon me, okay? I just do. And it gets worse as I get older. I get worse. Carol's laughing. She hears it, okay? You know, some of you have seen it, okay, in action. But really, let's live the truth that we came here to be. Let's see this thing change. It's happening now. Do you see it? It's happening on the political sector, thank God, okay? It's happening on all kinds of places. Go out there and find the good news where you see it in that place where your heart is breaking, okay? Bring it back and tell us all about it. Let's share it and give it, fervor, okay? Give it more heat and more passion and more of our love. Would you like to start a sacred activism group within the center? I think that would be amazing, okay? Because it's really important that we do that. It's important that we walk that walk. I am done and I love you guys. Thank you for being here today. All right.